Have you ever wondered how you can use a large language model like GPT-4 to actually write code for you and create applications? If the answer to that is yes, then this video is for you because I'm going to show you exactly how to do that from start to finish. Now, this video is going to be targeted more towards beginners and less technical people. So if you've never really done any coding before, but you're interested in learning how to do it or how you can actually start automating things and getting large language models like GPT-4 to write code for you, then this video I think is going to be really helpful. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it. So in this case, what we're going to be doing is we're going to get ChatGPT to create a word cloud generator application for us. And so if you're not familiar with word clouds, they're essentially a visual representation of text-based data, the kind of data that you might get in a survey questionnaire that you run where there's like an open-ended question where people can type in words to answer a question. And the problem with text-based data is that it's very unstructured and you have to go through a lot of different stages to process and analyze the data. And word clouds are just one type of analysis. Really, it shouldn't be the only thing you're doing because it's very limited. But a word cloud can give you a very quick visual representation of commonly recurring themes or concepts in your data. Because what it does is it shows essentially the most frequently recurring words in an image where the most recurring words appear larger and the less recurring words appear smaller. Now, I should also mention that there are lots of free word cloud generators on the web. So what we're doing here isn't exactly cutting edge, but at the same time, a lot of those word cloud generators will be limited, or they'll put certain features behind a paywall, or some of them actually just have features that are missing that I want to be able to see. So this is a chance for us to create our own kind of version of a word cloud generator that has some of the features that I want to see in it. But I should also mention that you don't need ChatGPT to actually write web applications for you to do this kind of thing. Here is an example of a chat session I had with ChatGPT. And essentially what I did was I was using GPT-4, so I was able to upload a data file. So this is on a paid plan. And I uploaded a text-based data set. This was a data set of brand open ends. What that means is there was a survey question that asked people, when you think of a brand in this category, which brand comes to mind? And people would type in things like Apple or Samsung. In this case, I believe it was e-commerce brands. And I'm based in Singapore, so the brands you're going to see are going to be more focused in Southeast Asia. But basically, one of the problems with this kind of question is that when people can type in whatever they want, they might spell it the wrong way. They might spell Amazon with two N's or two A's or something like that. And so you generally have to go through a couple of steps to clean the data. And you can see in this prompt, I did give it some direction. I said, I want you to get rid of common stop words. Like IDK is a common thing people will type in for I don't know. NA usually it's a short form for not applicable, etc. And you can see that ChatGPT kind of had this long conversation with itself. And it was actually, interestingly enough, writing its own code. So it was actually writing, you can see these are actually really common Python libraries that are used for data analysis. So pandas is a very popular Python library used by data scientists, and as is NLTK. This is used for analyzing text-based data. This is just what ChatGPT is doing itself to process the data. This is not me yet asking it to create an application. This is just what it's doing in the background. And you can see that ChatGPT went through a couple of stages here. It seems to have made some errors, and then it would try and self-correct those errors. I am not talking to ChatGPT at all at this point. It's doing it itself. And this is the eventual output. Now, this is great that I did this in about 20 seconds, but the problem is there are lots of issues. Aside from the formatting and the fact this doesn't look all that great, there are some issues here. So Shopee is one of the big e-commerce brands in Southeast Asia, and you can see that it hasn't combined any of the common misspellings. So you can see this is the correct spelling, SHOPEE. The 2P's version is incorrect. So that's one issue with this. But it also seems to be duplicating words. So you can see that every instance here of a different brand, Shopee is appearing twice and side by side in the same size. This is not hallucination. If you've ever heard of AI hallucination, that's where it makes stuff up because it's trying to give you an answer to something. This looks like it was some kind of error in its underlying Python script. There's some kind of problem or error in the code that it's written. So I was able to go back and say, hey, I want you to reprocess the data and fix these errors and fix all this stuff. And here is the revised version. It looks much, much better. It's gotten rid of all those duplicates for the most part. It's gotten rid of the errors, and it just generally looks better. That's great. We have essentially what I was really looking for here. The problem is that if I want to create another word cloud with a new data set, I'll have to go through all of this again, and I might have to go through multiple steps of troubleshooting it. And this is where getting ChatGPT to write an application for you so that you can just reuse that app over and over again can be really useful. So the next time, say I have a data set of text-based data, I don't have to go back and forth with ChatGPT to get the final output that I want. I can basically just spend some more time now creating the application that I want, and then it'll be readily usable in the future. And that's exactly what we're going to do now. Now, before we get straight into writing a prompt for ChatGPT, there are generally 4 things that I recommend that you think about before you go into writing your prompt. The first is that you do research. There may be other work done or other applications or coding libraries that you can leverage and that you can point ChatGPT to in order to make the output better. If you don't have to reinvent the wheel, then don't do it. And in the process of my research, I was able to come across some really good resources here on the website DataCamp that actually talked about how you can do text analysis in Python. You could do this yourself. In this case, we're going to get ChatGPT to write the code. And it talked about the NLTK library that I mentioned before. And it also talks about some really important steps that are involved in processing data before you get into creating the word cloud. Because again, you don't want ChatGPT to write a script that just visualizes words. There needs to be some pre-cleaning and pre-processing of the data. And so one of those steps is something we call tokenization. That is where you break a string of characters down into individual words. So if you have open-ends that have phrases or sentences, tokenization is very important to break those down into individual words. Another process is called stop words filtering, which is where you're getting rid of those words that you don't care about and or the. And in the context of research and surveys, you'll often see things like NA, not applicable, IDK, I don't know, etc. So I'm going to include these as instructions to ChatGPT when I get it to write my application. There's another really important process called stemming, but that's getting a little bit more advanced. We're not going to get into that right now. I also came across this other great article that pointed me to actually an existing Python library that's literally called word cloud that is already made that helps generate word clouds. And again, I'm going to use this as information that I give to ChatGPT to say, hey, there's already some existing Python libraries. You should consider using these. It'll help it work faster, and it'll also make the output more predictable because I've already figured out that there's some existing assets and resources that I can use. The second thing that's really important when you're using a large language model to write an application is you have to choose what environment you want it to be hosted in. In this case, I've kind of already decided that Python is probably a good programming language to use for this because there are existing libraries like NLTK and Pandas that I can leverage. And because I'm going to use Python, that kind of narrows my options for where I might want to host this. I could actually just run the Python scripts locally on my machine using the terminal and MacBook, but I want something that's going to be easier for other people to use. And so I've decided to use a service called Streamlit. Streamlit is a really cool free service that allows you to essentially turn basic Python scripts into web applications really, really easily. All you need to do is have your Python script hosted on GitHub, which we'll show you later on, and it'll essentially instantly create a web app. It's a really cool service, and I'm a big fan of it. The third thing that you should do is define your requirements in detail. So before you go in and start talking to ChatGPT, define in lots and lots of detail exactly what you want the application to do. Describe features, core functionality, how it works. You want to be detailed and comprehensive here, but again, you have to be mindful of how long this prompt is. And obviously, ChatGPT has something called a token limit. So you do have to find a good balance between being detailed and comprehensive, but also concise. And to help with this, I really like using a tool called Prompt Perfect. What it does is it allows you to write in your prompt and choose the underlying model, whether it's GPT 3.5, GPT 4, etc. And it will generate by default 2 versions of a new prompt, an optimized prompt that will hopefully help you get better output. I don't use Prompt Perfect for everything, but I generally use it for more complex and longer prompts because I do find that it's really good at restructuring it and essentially getting me better output. I should also mention at this point, all the tools I'm mentioning in this video, every single one, Prompt Perfect, ChatGPT, none of these tools are sponsoring this video. These are just the tools that I use. The fourth thing that I recommend you consider doing when it comes to creating applications with a large language model is creating wireframes. This is going to be optional. You don't have to do it, but with a paid version of ChatGPT using GPT-4, you can upload files. And I like to use a tool called Miro to create wireframes. Miro has a free version and a paid version, and it also has this really nifty wireframe library that has a whole bunch of pre-made components where you can make really basic wireframes. There are lots of wireframe tools out there, so if you have a preferred one like Figma, go and use that one. But the nice thing about creating a wireframe is that it reduces the unpredictability of the output. I actually find that ChatGPT is really good at building an interface based on a wireframe or image that you give it. So if you spend a few minutes, even if you're not that experienced creating wireframes, if you just spend some time mocking up where you want things to be on the layout, I do find that the output will be a lot better. So those are the four things that I generally find are really important when it comes to creating applications or writing code with ChatGPT. Now we're ready to go in and essentially plug in our prompts. So here you can see that I've actually uploaded my wireframe to ChatGPT and I've written out my full prompt. This has been optimized by Prompt Perfect. And you can see it's got all the key things that I've asked for here. I want this to be written in Python and hosted on Streamlit. I essentially want you to be able to copy and paste or upload a data file that contains text. And then I describe some of the steps I want it to take in processing the data, such as tokenization and stop words removal. And I also describe some other features and functionality that I just want to see in the word cloud generator, such as a slider that allows you to control the number of words that are shown in the word cloud, the ability to change the text color or case, and actually this one I was really interested in, which was the ability to introduce additional stop words after the cloud is generated. This is something that I always kind of wanted with other word cloud generators that I found online, which was you create a word cloud and it might filter out the standard stop words like no, the, and, etc. But maybe there are new words in there that you see that you don't want in there. And rather than having to go back to the raw data and clean it and then regenerate the word cloud, I just wanted essentially a simple feature that allowed me to type in new words and regenerate the cloud that removes those new stop words. So this is something that I'm kind of interested in and it's kind of unique to my needs. And then finally, I wanted the ability to create a downloadable PNG file or a graphic of the word cloud. So we are ready to go here. I'm going to plug this into ChatGPT. And you can see here that ChatGPT has gone through, it's written the entire script for me. And now that I have this Python script, I'm basically ready to go and create my Streamlit app. Now, before I actually go straight into Streamlit, Streamlit requires you to have your code sitting on a GitHub repository. So again, if you're completely new to this, don't worry. I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. So the first thing you want to do is go and create an account on GitHub. Now, once you've created your GitHub account, you can also go over to Streamlit and sign up for an account on Streamlit as well. And when you sign up for it, I recommend that you use the single sign-on option using your GitHub account. What this will do is it'll instantly synchronize Streamlit with your GitHub profile so that when you create new repositories or repos, as we call them, you'll be able to instantly access them within Streamlit. So step one is go into GitHub, create an account. Step two is go to Streamlit and sign up with the continue with GitHub option. Now, once that's done, go back into GitHub. And what I want to do is I want to create a new repository. So I'm going to go into repositories and I'm going to click on new. And we're going to give our repository a name. I'm just going to call this word cloud application. You have to leave the repo as public, so do not change this to private. You can also, if you want, add a README file later on if you want to help other people understand what this script is all about. You can also choose a license if you want to give people information about how they can reuse the code. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give it a name and leave it as public and click Create Repo. And what I want to do first is I want to create a new file. So I'm going to click on Create New File. And now we are in the file editor. So I'm going to go back over to ChatGPT. I'm going to copy the full code base here. And in here, I'm going to paste this in. Now, what I will also need to do is I need to give this file a name. And what you name it is very important. I'm going to call it streamlit_app.py. There's two things that are very important here. First of all, you need to remember to include the .py. You see what happened there when I added the .py extension? It changed all the colors. That's because GitHub is now recognizing the underlying programming language that we're using here, which is Python. So it knows that these are functions, etc. So remember to include the .py. The other thing that is important here is how you name this. Now, the thing is, we are essentially using other existing Python libraries to run this code. And one of the libraries is literally called wordcloud. This is another Python library with code that is separate that we're going to basically leverage to run some of the underlying processes in this application. The problem here is that depending on how you name this, it can create conflicts with some of the libraries that you need to import into this. For example, if I called this file wordcloud, or I called it pandas, for example, it can actually create a import conflict because the name of the file is exactly the same as one of the libraries it needs to import. So you'll usually know this because if you have an import conflict, when you run your Streamlit app, it'll come up with an error that says there's an import conflict. Just try and give your app a fairly unique name. In this case, I'm just going to call it Streamlit_app. I'm going to click on commit changes and commit changes again, and we're pretty good to go there. There is, though, one other thing I need to do before I connect my Streamlit app to this GitHub repo. And this is kind of mentioned in the instructions from ChatGPT. After the code base, it tells me here that you need to install the necessary packages, including Streamlit, matplotlib, which is used for the visualization, wordcloud, NLTK, and pandas. Now, it doesn't really tell you at this point exactly how you do that, but the way that you do that is you have to create something called a requirements file in GitHub. So we're going to go back here from the code tab. We're going to click create new file, and we're going to call this requirements.txt. So it needs to be called exactly this with that txt extension. And I'm going to paste in the names of these libraries. I'm going to remove the commas here and just put them on different rows. And that's it. All I'm going to do is I'm going to save this file, and it is done. What this is doing is this requirements file is telling Streamlit which Python libraries to load in and run. And this is all you need to do. You just need to create that requirements file, and you need to add in these library names. Now, before you go to the Streamlit application, what's really important is that you take note of the file name of the Python file, because we're going to need to copy and paste that into the Streamlit application. So we're done with GitHub for now. We're going to go over to Streamlit. I'm already logged into my dashboard, and I'm going to click on New App. And when you have signed in with your GitHub account, when you click on repository, it's going to show you the full list of all your repos, which is great. So the one that I just created, wordcloud application, is the latest one here. You can also just paste in the URL if you want, but I'm just going to select it here. The branch you can just leave to main. This just means that sometimes in the world of coding, you can have staging environments and beta environments where you don't push code to your main production environment, and we don't have that here, so we're just going to leave this as main. Now, this did not pull this in from the repo. This is actually just the default, what Streamlit always shows. And if you named your app something else, like just streamlit.py, you need to copy and paste it in here. Otherwise, it will not find the file and your app will not work. So just note that it will always show Streamlit_app. You cannot retrieve the file that you're looking for from your repo. You will need to paste that or type it in here. In this case, I essentially named my file the exact same thing that is the default for Streamlit. So now that that is done, I can just deploy my app. I don't need to do anything else. I'm just going to click deploy. And it's going to take a couple of minutes. Streamlit is a free service. It's also a very lean service. So you'll notice that after your apps have been running for a while, if they haven't been used, they'll go to sleep. So you might go to the app and it'll say this is sleeping. You can just push a button and wake it back up. And even any users, people who have access to the app, can wake an app back up. Again, because it's a free service, it runs very, very lean, but I really love it. And I think it's a great thing for it to help people learn how to code and build applications. And once this is done, it will essentially load your application. So here is the first version of my web application. And if we compare this to the wordcloud wireframe, this is actually just amazing at how close it was to the wireframe that I gave it. This is really cool. So all the features are here on the left side: the number of words slider, the ability to change the colors, the case, and the stop words feature. Now I'm going to give this a go, and you can see that I can either paste in the raw data or I can upload it as a CSV or a text file. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a go. I'm going to click Browse File, and I've got an example txt or cs file. Let's try importing this and click generate word cloud. And unfortunately, we have come up with an error. And this is one of the first lessons you're going to have when it comes to getting large language models to write code, whether it's GPT-4, Code Llama, or whatever, is that it's never going to be perfect. You're never going to get perfect output on the first go. You're going to have to go back and forth and do some troubleshooting. Now, when it comes to troubleshooting code, you will want to give ChatGPT as much information as possible. And the good thing about Streamlit is that you can get access to what's called a log file. So when you're logged in, what you want to do is go to Manage App. And then from here, this is actually the log data here. You can just click on this little settings icon and click download log, and it will now download the log file. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload the log file to ChatGPT, and I'm also going to paste in this error here. So you can see what I did was I uploaded the log data there. There were actually some other issues that I encountered that I didn't talk about in the video here with some of the functionality, and I pasted in the error. And ChatGPT was able to go through the log data and the error and say, oh, I've essentially been able to pinpoint the issue, and it gave me some revised code. Now, another thing you're going to find with ChatGPT is that it is also going to try and run as lean as possible. And rather than giving you the entire code base, it'll sometimes give you just code snippets. And if you're less familiar with how to code, or you're not that familiar or comfortable with Python, you might really struggle figuring out where to insert the code. I recommend that you try to learn some of the basics and try and update the code yourself. But if you're really in a bit of a pickle, what you can do is you can go back and ask ChatGPT to give you the full code base that you can just copy and paste into GitHub. So what I did was I updated the code manually. So I went back to my GitHub repo. I clicked on the file name here for Streamlit app. And what you can do is you can just edit it right here. So you can click edit the file. And once you've made all the changes, you just click commit changes, and it is going to instantly upload your app. So once the code base is saved and uploaded here, it'll essentially instantly update your app in Streamlit. It usually takes about 5 or 10 seconds for those revisions to be reflected. If it's taking a while, you can either just click rerun the app here, or you can also reboot the app sometimes. So if you click on Manage App, Reboot App, this is going to take about 2 or 3 minutes to reboot it completely. But once you're ready to go, I can try browsing my data and importing it here. And I'm going to try and do this again, click generate app. And there we go. We have a working application. So I only had one issue there really with the code base that I essentially was able to fix really quickly with ChatGPT. And you can see, in this case, I've uploaded a CSV file. I can use this slider here and reduce this. So you can see that it has fewer words here. I can click on colorful text if I want to. I have to keep clicking generate cloud here. There's colorful text. I don't really like the colors here, so I'm going to regenerate that. You can also see I can change the case. And this is where the stop words feature kind of comes in. You can see that the word NA is kind of popping up a few times here. I'm not quite sure it's why it's exactly appearing more than once. It might be because it's spelled, actually, it's being recognized in different ways. There might be a space after it or something like that. But either way, I'm just going to type in NA here as the additional stop words, click regenerate, and there you go. It's removed it. This was the kind of cool thing that the other word cloud generators didn't have, and that I now have in my own private word cloud generator. And again, you can see that I can also introduce additional stop words, so separate them with a comma, and I'm going to type in better. I don't want that one. And there we go. It's now removed that. So I can introduce these additional stop words, and I can download an image file here, and there is my image. So this is working pretty well. This took me less than an hour inclusive of the research, but from the point at which I put the prompt into ChatGPT and got the initial app up and running, it only took me less than about 5 to 10 minutes to get this up and running, which is really, really cool. So that's it. We've created our first web application using ChatGPT. It's a pretty basic web application, but it's also pretty cool what we were able to do in a very short amount of time. But I think it's really important that you do have clear and realistic expectations of coding with a large language model. Whether using ChatGPT or Code Llama or GitHub Copilot, the truth is that it's not going to be as magical and as painless as you might think it is, or even as it might have looked in this video. There's really 3 lessons that I like to tell people when I'm talking to them about coding with a large language model. The first one is that you should make your first prompt count. I experimented with a few different versions of this where I had a shorter, leaner prompt with fewer requirements in the beginning. The idea was that I just wanted to get the base application up and running, and then I would introduce new features as I went. The problem I found, particularly with GPT-4, is that it's prone to reinventing the wheel. It just rewrites its entire code base. So the first time I wrote a prompt, it wrote about 120 lines of code, and then I had to fix some bugs and introduce some new features. And the next version was 60 lines of code, and it was completely rewritten and importing different Python libraries. I'm sure there are ways to fix this and make this better. But again, if you're new to coding with a large language model, you might find that in the process of introducing new features or fixing some broken features that you will break other features. So what I found is that making your first prompt count really, really helps. Get all that core functionality into that first prompt. Even if the prompt is really, really long, make sure that you can get as much into that first set of instructions as possible. You will also find that ChatGPT will just ignore some of those instructions. It'll even comment in the code and say, this feature has not been fully deployed and that kind of stuff. And that's fine. But try and get as much detail and instruction into that first prompt as possible. The next thing is you need to know the limitations. You are not going to code the next Facebook using ChatGPT. First of all, there are token limits in chat sessions. A token limit is basically a limitation to how long your chat session and the output of that session can be. And generally for average users, you're not going to come up against the token limit, but when it comes to programming and coding, you will definitely come up against these limits pretty quickly. There are solutions for this where you can really modularize your code. Instead of getting one master code base, you can split up different functions and features into different code bases, which can help deal with that issue of token limits and also breaking your code so that if you fix one thing, it doesn't break everything else. But again, modularizing your code is also a little bit tricky to do. So you just need to know the limitations of the tool. And if you're a beginner and new to coding and coding with LLMs, you just need to learn to walk before you can run. The last thing I want to say is that you should really learn the basics. And what I mean by that is if you're new to programming languages like Python or JavaScript, try and learn some of the basics. And you can learn on the go. You can use this as a way to learn how to code. So you can get ChatGPT to write the initial code base, and then you can ask it, hey, what does this function do? Explain how this works. I actually find that it's super powerful to learn how to code while you're actually doing it rather than just reading blogs and articles and then going off and trying to do it later on. So using a large language model to actually program applications and learn how to code at the same time, I think is really, really cool. But try to learn some of the basics, because if you are 100% reliant on the AI to write the code and troubleshoot, you are going to have enormous problems. Sometimes there are some issues or bugs that will come up that are actually really, really simple to fix. And if you have to go back to ChatGPT, even for some of the most basic things, you might find that it actually breaks your code because it's fixing that and breaking other things. So trying to learn some of the basics will help you become a better coder or a more technical person, but it will also mean that you will be able to be a lot faster and more efficient with this. So try not to become 100% reliant on the AI. Try to learn some of the basics, because if you do, the outcomes and the outputs will be even better. So I hope this video was useful for you. If you got to the end of the video, I'd really appreciate if you could give the video a like and subscribe to my channel. I talk about all things data analytics, data science, market research, and AI. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.